Live. Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, everyone. We should be live right now. So welcome to this Zakat webinar with myself, Osama Mezwi, and Sheikh Joe Bradford. Just so I know everything's working and we're having no technical issues, if you can leave a comment, leave a message right now, that would be fantastic. That way I know that I'm talking to you and not talking to my screen. So let me know if you can hear me loud and clear. Perfect. So my name is Osama Mezwi. I am the CEO of Penny Appeal USA, and I have the honor and pleasure of being your host this evening for this Zakat webinar. We're really privileged to have you. Let me know where you are coming in from. So where are you tuning in from? Leave us a few messages here. Which city, which state are you logging in from? It's always great to know the coverage. Illinois is the first to respond. Fantastic. We've got Sister Sadia from Illinois. So welcome. For those of you maybe not familiar with Penny Appeal USA, I'll say a few words about the organization. We are a 501c3 organization. We are a non-profit entity, and our work is in the area of poverty alleviation. Our vision is poverty eradication, both here in the United States and overseas. We currently work in over 30 countries, providing a range of interventions, a range of programs that have this vision of eradicating poverty. As well as providing orphan care, we provide access to healthcare, access to clean water, access to education. Very important, we provide access to income, and so income generation programs, giving people a means to make a livelihood, to sustain themselves. We also have our food insecurity program, Feed Our World, which is feeding families here in the United States and across the world in 30 countries. So welcome from Houston, welcome from Maryland and Illinois. And this evening, it's an opportunity for us to learn, to hear from Sheikh Joe Bradford, as well as an opportunity for you to ask those all-important Zakat questions. Now, all of us, anyone who's tried to calculate Zakat understands it can be complicated at times. There are lots and lots of things to take into consideration. And so we hope this evening that you leave with a better grasp of what Zakat is, what's required, what's in, what's out. And inshallah, we will leave with a far better grasp of our own personal Zakat finances. And so without further ado, let me introduce Sheikh Joe Bradford, who is an American scholar of Islam. He holds a Master's of Islamic Law from the University of Medina and has studied traditionally in the Muslim world for over 20 years, working as an ethical finance advisor to individuals and institutions. Sheikh Joe is one of the few experts on issues involving Muslims and finance in North America. And as a co-founder of mywasiya.com, he has leveraged his extensive knowledge of Islamic inheritance to create a world-class product that bridges the gap between traditional Islamic knowledge and requirements of the US legal system. That's mywasiya.com, WASSIYAH. If you don't know the website, it is a fantastic website. Check it out this evening after the webinar. His own website is joebradford.net, where you'll find lots of fantastic, useful resources, information, articles from Sheikh Joe himself. So let me welcome and introduce, bring on Sheikh Joe now to join us. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu.
Hi, Sheikh.
Alhamdulillah, doing great. How about yourself, Osama?
Great to see you. Very well.
Great to see you too.
Where are you joining us from?
Houston, Texas.
Excellent. So COVID-19, how's it treating you?
Alhamdulillah, myself and family, we have been blessed to not have to deal with any of the ramifications of it directly as far as illness. A few of my students and friends have, and we've been making dua for their recovery. One, unfortunately, his father passed away from the illness. May Allah accept him and write him amongst the martyrs. And a few others have had contracted it but recovered. And you know, it's a difficult time, but I think that it's a very instructive time for us as well. to learn how to adapt and to be our best selves when dealing with limited resources and limited movement. It's really going to take it upon ourselves to have to look inwards and become better.
Absolutely. So we hope, inshallah, that everybody joining us is safe as well, that your families are safe, and not just the financial, not just the health impact, but of course, we know there's massive financial impact too nationwide with mass unemployment and people really experiencing a lot of suffering. So we pray and hope that, inshallah, everyone is well and the impact on yourselves and your families hasn't been too intense. So Sheikh Joe, if you could start, inshallah, with the introduction of zakat, about maybe 15 to 20 minutes, give us the landscape, that would be great, and then we'll do some Q&A after that.
Sure. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa man walahum wa ba'd. When I thought about how we could talk about the issues of zakat in 15 minutes, I definitely prefer that we have a lot more time left for questions and answers. So we won't go into too much detail, but there are mainly 3 points that I wanted to touch on when talking about the idea of zakat and sadaqah. And the first is that after Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes mankind as being perturbed and kind of perennially disturbed by his own situation when he is given or when he is hit by or struck by evil, he is disturbed, and when he is given good, he prevents it from others. He makes an exception to this in Surah Al-Ma'arij. He says, "Illa al-musallin," except those who pray. And then he praises those who pray, those who are invested in their own personal worship, by saying, وَالَّذِينَ فِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ حَقٌّ مَعْلُومٌ لِلسَّائِلِ وَالْمَحْرُومِ, those who have in amongst their wealth a known right for those who beg of them and those who have been prevented. So I think it's extremely important when we talk about the ideas of sadaqah, the ideas of zakah, that we remember that others still have a right on us, despite our intentions to try and prolong what we have, despite our worries about the future and the uncertainties. By sharing our wealth and allowing others to improve their lot in life and to come out of the difficulties that they are in, we will, as a society, overall improve ourselves as well. So we should never look at our charity and our zakat, even in the most difficult times, as being something that takes away from us, but it's something that actually gives to us as a whole. As the Prophet ﷺ said, "Ma naqasa malun min sadaqah." Wealth was never diminished because of charity, because what we give will come back to us. And I know that a lot of people are probably waiting for Ramadan to give their sadaqah and their zakat, and we do only have about a week left until Ramadan, but the need is now. With COVID-19, problems that were there with eliminating hunger, poverty, lack of resources for people around the globe didn't go away, they only exacerbated. And so Anas ibn Malik radiallahu anhu is a beautiful statement that he said, "Bakiru bis sadaqah, fa inna al-bala'a la yatakhatta as-sadaqah." He said, give your charity early, because afflictions will never jump over or will never outstrip your charity. So it's really important that even though our intention is that we're giving something in Ramadan and we want to get the benefit of that, taking a different look at that and understanding that many of the pious people of the past would actually give their zakat in Sha'ban before Ramadan. So it was as if they had finished their pillar of Islam, and that everything that they gave in Ramadan was multiplied 10 to 700 to beyond that, and therefore made up for any of the misgivings or any of the things that they had missed out on in their obligation. Just as we pray our 5 daily prayers, and then we pray tahajjud and tarawih and all of the extra nawafil to fill in the gaps that we have in our pillar, which is salah. So I really encourage everyone to give now, because the need is now, And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not hold back the reward that you have because of your intention to want to give in Ramadan. Your wealth now and then will both be multiplied. Secondly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about zakah, and the command to take zakat in the Quran is mentioned in Surah At-Tawbah. خُذْ مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ صَدَقَةً تُطَهِّرُهُمْ وَتُزَكِّيهِمْ بِهَا وَصَلِّ عَلَيْهِمْ. Take from their wealth a duty which you cleanse them by, and you purify them with, and pray for them. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there are three characteristics that are mentioned here. Number one is the idea that zakat is a duty. We many times translate sadaqah as charity, that we are giving it up, but in reality, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mandated that we help those who are in need, as we mentioned from Surah Al-Ma'arij. Helping those in need is a duty that we have, and it tests our truthfulness, which is why the word sadaqah comes from the same root word as sidq, as truthfulness, charity or duty, from sidq, truth, because it shows how truthful we are to what we believe in our duty to Allah and our duty to our fellow man. And then there are two other things that happen when we give our zakah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, تُطَهِّرُهُمْ وَتُزَكِّيهِمْ بِهَا. You cleanse them and purify them therewith. There is an internal effect that giving charity has on us, and that is we're able to rid ourselves of the worst of character, the character of stinginess and miserliness and self-sufficiency and thinking that we need no one. Fasting teaches us that we actually do need food and drink. Giving our charity teaches us that others do need what we are able to give them. And so by cleansing ourselves of these bad characteristics, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to not only grow spiritually, but also to grow financially. And
So, Sheikh,
yeah.
Apologies. Let me ask a clarification question.
Sure.
You're using sadaqah and zakat as almost a synonym.
Sure.
Often I've heard it being said that sadaqah, if you like, is the part of charity that is not compulsory, that we choose to give. It's not mandated. Whereas zakat is, of course, if like almost a tax. It's an obligation. It's something we have to do. And some people do separate zakat and sadaqah in their usage of the words.
Of course.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So I think when we look at the texts that were revealed, they're used interchangeably. So when we find sadaqah and zakah used at the same time, zakah refers to the 2.5% mandated amount that we would give, and sadaqah to any free amount that we give to any charitable cause that we might give it to. And when they're used individually, they can be interchangeable. So when we say sadaqah, that includes all forms of giving, mandatory and non-mandatory. And when we talk about purifying ourselves through zakah, it can include both mandatory and non-mandatory forms of purification. But that's an excellent question, and it allows us to segue into the idea of what is mandatory for us when we talk about zakat. تُزَكِّيهِمْ بِهَا, that you purify yourself. So the Prophet ﷺ describes zakat as awsakhun nas, the filth of the people, that essentially like a plant, when a plant sheds its leaves, in the Arabic language it says zakah zara, the vegetation paid its zakah by shedding its leaves. And a plant never sheds its leaves unless there's something diseased or old, or the seasons have changed and the ground around them needs to be fertilized, and only they and all around them can grow when that happens. So our zakah, by giving up what we love, we are able to grow along with society. And as they say, when the water rises, all boats rise with it. And that's kind of the idea behind paying our mandatory zakah. So there are a couple of key concepts when we talk about paying our zakah. Number one is, if we have, and I'll give you a formula that you can use, and each word in the formula we can probably pick apart for hours, but we'll allow your questions to come in about that. If you own certain types of assets, those assets that your assets minus your expenses, if they are greater to or equal, they are greater than or equal to the nisab, which is the minimum amount that you would own for a year, then that amount times 2.5% is the zakat that you owe. So if you have, assets of $10,000 and you were to have, say expenses of $3,000, you'd have $7,000 in net wealth. And then once you multiply that by 2.5%, you get $175. That would be the mandatory amount that you would give away as your zakat for that year. And so that $7,000 of savings you've had for more than a year is certainly more than the minimum that you would have in either gold, the value of gold or silver. And so you're mandated to give that away. What kind of assets fall under that? There are three general considerations when we talk about what money is liable for zakat. Number one, it should be liquid. So it should be cash or cash equivalents. So we're talking about cash in the bank, gold or silver, stocks and other financial instruments that can be sold easily. Not included in that is personal property. Not included in that are antiques, which really don't have a value until after they're sold. Large real estate investments that really can't be valuated until they're negotiated and then sold. You can pay zakat on the value of that later on, but we're talking about your yearly zakat you would pay from anything which is essentially liquid. Number two is, how do you own it? Do you have control over it? Is it in your sock drawer? Is it in your bank account? Is it in your brokerage account? If you can access it at any time without penalty and take and benefit from it by spending it, investing it, giving it away, then zakat is liable upon it. And thirdly, it should have been with you as a surplus beyond your principal needs for a year. And for most of us, we can look at our bank statements and see that, yeah, I've had $500 or more. Or, I've looked at the nisab of silver the other day. I believe it was $275. So many of us have had $275 or more in savings in some account somewhere for more than a year. So we take the aggregate of that account minus any expenses that we have, like rent, like insurance, like taxes, if they're due at that time. And that gives us our net zakat liable wealth. Multiply that by 2.5%, and then that's what we give as zakat.
Great. So just to summarize before you carry on, we're talking here about assets minus expense. For it to be an asset that you would calculate, it has to be liquid. So we're talking about cash or a cash equivalent. Two, you have to have control of the item. It's accessible. It's readily available. It's not hidden away in a complicated account where maybe you have to pay fees to get it out. And then three, you've had it. It's a surplus for over 12 months.
That's correct.
Perfect.
That is correct. And so, if you have that assets minus expenses, then you multiply that amount by 2.5%. If you're using the Hijri Islamic year, some people, they pay their zakat according to the Gregorian calendar for tax purposes and their business and so on and so forth. If you do that, you would pay 2.578%, because that is the difference between the 11 days that are extra in the solar year as opposed to the lunar year. And that's so that you make sure that you're not, cheating yourself out of your obligation for those 11 days. And then that amount that you have in zakat can be given to any one of 8 categories. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions those 8 categories in Surah At-Tawbah in the 60th verse, where he says that charity, the charitable duty is to be given to the poor and the indigent and those working to collect and distribute it, and those who are in debt and in the manumission of slaves and in the course of refugees. And we said, I'm sorry, الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم, and in softening the hearts of those who are new to or struggling with their Islam, وفي الرقاب, and in manumitting slaves, recidivism programs and prison release programs and human trafficking programs. Those are modern examples of that. وَفِي الرِّقَابِ وَالْغَارِمِينَ, and those who are in debt. وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, in Allah's path, and in paying debt. So those 8 categories, if you apply that zakat wealth to some of those, or any of those, or just one of those, you've met your obligation. Now, one thing that should be said, almost all scholars have agreed that the first 2 categories, which are the poor and the indigent, those who do not have enough money to have food for a week or food for a day or two, they should take precedence over all other categories. Because since the first verses that were revealed to the Prophet ﷺ in Mecca until the very end of his life, the poor and the indigent, those who were experiencing daily hunger, famine, going without for days to weeks on end, they were always mentioned. And the others were mentioned as ancillary to that core need in society. So when we alleviate poverty and hunger, we are able to then benefit others as well.
So that makes sense. If someone is, of course, literally starving, hungry, they don't have enough food for a week or a month, they should take priority or precedent over the other categories. Is there a geographic limit to that? I mean, what if someone on your street or in your neighborhood or in your city isn't starving, isn't food insecure for a week, but someone halfway across the world is? What have scholars said about that? Is there a geographic component to that prioritization?
I'm really glad that you asked that. And so let's remember that in classic Islamic legal discussions, we were dealing with generally agrarian, rural, farm-based economies where people would take days, if not weeks, to travel. And to send money from one place to the other meant you really went out of your way to do that. And you probably were only benefiting from people in your locality, and therefore the mandate was to pay your zakat and spend it in your locality. Now, the logic behind paying zakat in your locality was that you've benefited economically from the poor in your area through menial service jobs, through even feeling better about yourself by seeing someone that's going without, and that's part of the sin that we're washing away through giving our charity, right? So it makes sense for there to be a redistribution of wealth amongst those that you have benefited from their presence. Now, in a globalized economy, where we are using, electronics and services that their components and providers are all around the world, it makes sense as well to keep the logic of giving and to allocate some for our locality, but also to give to eradicate the mass inequalities that happen around the world because of the type of economy that we live in that benefits from everywhere around the world.
Okay, excellent.
So I think that's really to sum up everything about zakat. Number one, don't delay when there's a need. Allah knows your intention. Number two, especially in a time right now where people are in dire need, this affliction won't be able to surpass your charity. So be charitable, give your sadaqah and your zakah. Number three, the basic calculation of assets minus expenses times 2.5%, is very easy for us to figure out. Calculate that amount. Give to organizations like Penny Appeal, who I've known for years and who do great work in eradicating hunger and caring for the basic needs of people. And then I think what I'd like to do now is just kind of like open the door for any questions that people that have joined us have, because maybe they have very specific questions about what types of assets and expenses are applicable to.
Excellent. So those of you who are tuned in right now, you will see there is a question. There's a tab there that says ask a question. You can go into that tab and ask a question. I see already we have a few. So there is a tab where you see people donate. There is another button there that says ask a question. So any questions you have whatsoever for Sheikh Joe this evening about zakat, of course we welcome questions about Penny Appeal, about our work as well. feel free to put your question in that tab. If you can't find that tab, I know sometimes it's a little bit finicky if you're on your phone. You can also ask in the comments section, which we also have access to. I have a few questions, and while I do that, you may see a pop-up on your screen. It gives you an opportunity to support some of Penny Appeal's programming. You can visit pennyappealusa.org or pausa.org to find out more about our work. Sheikh, I have a few questions as folks are forming and thinking about their own questions. Is Zakat, of course, is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. It's one of those things you learn when you're very young, or even those from other faiths. It's one of the first things we teach is the zakat payment, one of the 5 pillars. Briefly, I know that we don't have that much time, but why is zakat one of the 5 pillars, and what's the history of that in our tradition?
I think one of the reasons why zakat is one of the 5 pillars of Islam is to remind us that how we benefit from others and how others benefit from us financially all goes back to the sustenance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us. And it is to remind us to connect ourselves to our Creator through the sustenance that He gives us. And so, if we look at the other 5 pillars, the Shahada is the basis of Islam and how anyone accepts the faith and submits to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and follows the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Prayer is a very personal action that has an effect on the person's heart, mind, and soul. Fasting is something which is done to rid ourselves of ostentation. It's not something that it's, although it's personal, it's not done to it's not done in front of people. No one knows you're fasting unless you actually tell them. Hajj is a very communal pillar of Islam that incorporates our financial obligations, our need to travel, the brotherhood of Islam, the fatherhood in the millah of Ibrahim alayhi salam, and so many general communal precepts. And for zakat, it's the one pillar of Islam that goes beyond just the spiritual and the communal, but allows us to be spiritually and communally effective in other people's lives.
Great. So a clarification question again, it's the 2.578 is for those who pay in the Gregorian calendar or according to our Hijri lunar calendar?
2.578 is for those who pay according to the Gregorian calendar.
Okay.
And the reason that is that some people's businesses, some people's fiscal years are centered around taxable events, and they want to be able to lower their taxes by giving their zakat at the same time. And so if they're going to follow the Gregorian calendar, then they just need to make up for those 11 days. Otherwise,
Right.
if you're just doing Ramadan to Ramadan or Sha'ban to Sha'ban, then you can do 2.5%.
Excellent. Now, we said that your zakatul mal, what you have to pay is your assets minus your expenses. And once you do that calculation, if it's plus or equal to the nisab, then you have to pay it. Now, my question is around the nisab. We hear that there's the option of going for a gold nisab, and some people pay on a silver nisab.
Yes.
Would love you to explore that a little bit.
So the gold and the silver nisab are based upon the predominant forms of currency that were present during the lifetime of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. 20 gold dinar and 200 silver dirham. Now, it's important to note that silver was actually the most predominant of the two. Not many people had gold at that time. Most people in the marketplaces, in trade, they used silver and they saved silver. Most of the ahadith that the Prophet ﷺ speaks about nisab in mention silver, and gold is somewhat secondary. At that time, they were a bit more on par. Nowadays, there is disparity between the value. So you will find, say, 1 gram of silver to be about 50 cents, if I checked the other day, and 1 gram of gold to be about $50. So we're talking about a difference between, $275 as the nisab of silver versus $4,750 for the nisab of gold. Now, when we ask ourselves, well, which of the two do we use? We can make an appeal, like a historical appeal, and say, well, silver was more predominant. It was mentioned more in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and therefore we should use silver. But there's also a spiritual and a legal meaning there too, and that is, why was zakat legislated? Zakat was legislated to benefit those who have less, and to benefit those who are in need, and to take care of the needs of the poor. And when we use silver, yes, the nisab is lower, $275, but what happens when we have a lower nisab? We actually have, when we have a lower nisab, we have a larger number of people who are giving. And yes, they might only be giving $10 or $20. And that's not something strange. In Zakat al-Fitr, at the end of Ramadan, all of us give, as long as we have food in our homes, we give something to the poor. So it's not strange to have less than high net worth people and give charity. It actually allows us, as those who have lower net worth, to still, number one, fulfill a pillar of Islam. Number two, to do this great act of worship at this time of the year. And then number three, to actually be part and parcel of change in the community and in society as a whole.
So to be clear, your recommendation is that folks should try and use the silver nisab, because then it brings more people into the fold. More people will be liable for zakat. Regardless of our wealth, more of us can contribute and be involved in the process of zakat giving.
Exactly, yes.
So, is there a majority opinion that falls on either way from a different schools of thought? Or because you go on many charity websites, I see they use gold. At Penny Appeal, we've actually opted for the silver because I think we agree that we're trying to get as many people involved in the process of giving zakat as possible. But is there a majority school, and is there a breakdown based on schools of thought or madhab?
There really is no majority school. And because this is an approximation that was made by modern and pre-modern scholars as to which of the two, will be more beneficial to the poor. And so in one instance, those who preferred gold, they said, well, this just means that more people will have more savings longer. Those who preferred silver said, well, the reason zakat is there is not to protect the wealth of those who have it, but to protect the rights of the poor who do not. And so I think from a maqasid sharia, from the objectives of the sharia standpoint, the idea of using silver is better and safer to use. Although I will have to say this, because this does come up. This is when you are approximating the values of currency into gold or silver. If you have silver, or if you have gold at home, like many women will have gold jewelry, then you will use the nisab of gold for that gold jewelry. So if it's 85 grams of gold or more, and that's 85 grams of pure gold minus the stones that are in it or any alloy, and if it's 85 grams or more of gold, then you will pay on that gold. Else, you will not. And if you have silver, 595 grams of silver, else you will not pay on that silver. But when we're talking about cash equivalent, stocks, those types of things, then you're going to use silver, as that's going to that was more predominant and better for the poor.
So on that, is this related to the issue around usage? So a lot of questions that come to us around gold and silver, and actually we have a question this evening about diamond ring. Is a diamond ring part of my asset? So that's a question that's just come in now. Typically people talk about usage. Scholars say, well, if the woman, for example, is wearing that jewelry, it's not part of her zakat asset. If it's more of an investment or savings, then it is. If you could elaborate on that, that would be great.
So that is a classical discussion about jewelry in particular. And I did see the question about the diamond ring. Your diamond is not liable for zakat. So precious stones are not liable for zakat. And I would say that generally the value of precious stones is very subjective. But the precious metal, the gold or silver underneath, is liable, and you should have it weighed. Now, there are some scholars who said that if a woman is wearing that jewelry or is lending it out for women to wear at parties and such, then she is not liable. And they looked at it as a utility basis. So yes, if you are holding it for value and savings, then it's just like cash or coin that you have. And if not, then it's much like a personal asset, and you don't pay zakat on your personal asset. Other scholars disagreed, and they said that the Prophet ﷺ, in the hadith of Abu Hurairah in Sahih Muslim, he said, "Ma min sahibi dhahabin wala fidda la yuaddi zakatuhuma illa uhmiyat lahu fi nari jahannam." There's never a person who owns gold or silver and doesn't pay zakat, except that it will be heated for them in the hells of the fire of hell, and then used to brandish them on a day which is 50,000 years long, and then their path will be seen either to heaven or to hell. The hadith of Salama in Sunan Abi Dawood, where the Prophet ﷺ saw a woman wearing a gold bangle, and he asked her, "Did you pay zakat on this?" And she said, "No." He said, "This is enough of the hellfire for you." There's also a similar hadith from Aisha about that. So personally, what I advise is for women to pay your zakat on that. Now, approximation is if you have just a few pieces of jewelry, you probably don't have nisab, so you don't have to worry about that. So if you have a ring and a necklace, or a few rings and a necklace, you probably don't have 85 grams of gold. But if you have 15 gold bangles, right, then you probably have 85 grams or more. So if you're in doubt, you take it to a reputable jeweler and have it weighed, and they'll be able to also tell you the pure weight versus the alloy, taking out, minus any carats of stones or anything like that's in there, and then give you, what is there for you.
So one final time. For gold, it's 85 grams and above, is what you're suggesting?
Yes.
And for silver?
Yes. 595. 595 grams. And those are approximations based on the coinage that was prevalent at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. And those are the numbers that were standardized by IOFI, which is an international organization that sets standards for Islamic financial transactions.
Excellent. And we're saying diamonds and other precious stones are not part of one's assets because the valuation can be subjective. Excellent. One question we get a lot of, and we have it this evening, is 401k. I'm sure you get this question a lot.
Yes.
For those of us who are blessed to have a 401k pot, do we calculate that when we do our annual zakatul mal calculations?
So there are generally two positions about your 401k and how you will pay zakat on your 401k. And what has been a very popular opinion has been that you pay zakat on your 401k by taking the aggregate amount that is in there. Now, let's just say it's $100,000. This is the first opinion. I just want to make this clear. The first opinion is that if you have $100,000 in your 401k, you will subtract the penalty that you would pay, which is 10%. And let's say you're in a 25% percentile of taxes. So that's, 35%. So you're left with $65,000 after that. And then from your readily available liquid wealth, you would pay 2.5% of $65,000, whatever that comes up to be. Now, the other opinion says that unless you physically actually receive a distribution from your 401k, or you are of retirement age and have access to those funds, then you will not pay zakat on that 401k account. And the reason being is they differ on how do we understand how we own and access that wealth. So those of the first opinion said, it's yours, you have to pay. Those of the second opinion said, yes, it's ours, and we will pay, but one of the reasons why zakat was legislated is because we can directly benefit from the money that we hold. And with our 401k, it's actually tied up in investments. And if we pull money out, we're breaking our agreement to leave that money in there, and thus breaking a contract and taking earnings early, causing ourselves to lose money, as well as causing ourselves to have to pay out money. And there's a principle in the Sharia mentioned first by Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, إنما الزكاة على ما نض من الأموال. Zakat is only due on realized gains. So when your money is being compounded and that's invested and reinvested over and over, and you don't have realized gains until the contract with your money manager ends, and that's supposed to be at the time of retirement, you never really have realized those gains to that point. So that plus many other legal discussions. I wrote an article about this on my website that can be referenced. I am of the opinion that you do not pay on your 401k until you actually pull money out for a distribution, early distribution or a qualified distribution, or you have retired and you have access. And when you retire, there are two ways that you could pay at that time. You will either pay as a long-term passive investment and simply pay on the book value, or you will pay as a lump sum if you end up taking out all of that money. And all of the details of that I've discussed in my book, Simple Zakat.
Excellent. We have a very specific question, which is very topical. I want to donate my zakat to Lebanon, but due to financial collapse, banks aren't letting people withdraw, and they're doing currency manipulation from US dollar to lira. I pay zakat every Ramadan. Can I take 2.5% of my assets and pay it when I visit Lebanon by hand at a later date?
Excellent question. And this is a question that actually comes up quite frequently, not only in the in terms of currency manipulation, but just in the idea of is calculation the same as distribution? So, for example, someone says, there are banking regulations that prevent me from sending money. What if I calculate it now and then distribute it at a later date? Some people say, I don't have any problem transferring money, but I know that the people that I transfer it to, maybe distant relatives back home, if I were to give them a lump sum of $1,000, they would waste it. So can I calculate it, set it aside, and then pay them $100 on monthly withdrawal? And the answer is yes, you can do that. So what's the obligation for you is to calculate it, recognize that that is the right of the poor, and then dedicate that to a cause. Meaning that if you're going to hold it and basically keep it as an amana, keep it as a trust, and then give that for a charitable cause, that's permissible for you to do if the circumstances necessitate that. Now, another thing that I want to draw people's attention to is a lot of times people say, well, I want to be able to do that, but it's hard for me to calculate the money and then cordon it off and then withdraw from that as a sub account. One thing that you can do is you can actually put an automatic withdrawal from your bank account for a specific amount. So let's say, for example, you want to sponsor food packets for Penny Akil throughout the year instead of giving them a lump sum in Ramadan. So what I do is April of 2020, I start paying $50 a month to Penny Akil. In Ramadan of 2021, I look backwards and I say, how much money did I give to Penny Appeal over the year? Oh, I gave them $500 or $600 because it was 12 months from then to then. Then I calculate my zakat and I see that I owe $750 of zakat this year. I subtract the 600 and then I give 150 to whatever cause is present at that time. That's another way to do it. So to go back to the question about Lebanon, yes, it's permissible for you to do that as long as you are cognizant that you calculate and dedicate it, and then you hold it as a trust, and then give it to the poor there. And it should be said that while many pre-modern scholars said that zakat had to be paid locally, they did make exceptions for sending money to family members that were in dire need. And as the Prophet ﷺ said about charity and zakat that is given to people that are family relations, he said, "Innaha sadaqatun wa sila." It's an act of charity and an act of strengthening family ties.
Excellent. So we have about 15 minutes. So I'll try and keep this brief and get through as many of these as possible. A reminder to those of you watching, if you have a question you'd like to ask the Sheikh, please put it in the Ask a Question tab. One question we get a lot of, Sheikh, is around student loans here in the US. It's possible for someone, as you know, to go through law school or medical school and come out with $300,000, $400,000 in loan.
Sure.
For people in that situation, as they're calculating their zakat in a calculator, what do they do with the student loan?
So if you have a large scheduled debt, which is not due in its entirety, you will only subtract the amount which is currently due. So let's say, for example, I have a mortgage, or I have a student loan, or I have a car note, right? Or I have a tax debt of some type. And my monthly payment is $250 to my student loan, and I know that I'm going to be paying that for the foreseeable future, then I deduct $250, right? I don't deduct the entire $250,000 of my student loan, because then no one would pay zakat, right?
You deduct the month or the 12 months annual?
You deduct the month, whatever is current.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, if you pay your bill or your debt in an interval that is greater than a week or a month, so let's say, for example, I pay down my student debt every 3 months, then you can deduct 3 months.
Okay.
Right. So basically, take whatever the current amount is. So some people will deduct 1 month of their car insurance. Or somebody says, no, I actually pay my car insurance bi-yearly and it's due at the time I pay my zakat, then you deduct 6 months because it's due at that time.
Great. So let's do a quick fire round. Some of these ones I think we can get through pretty quickly.
Okay.
Number one, do I need to have the gold or silver for over a year for it to qualify for zakat?
Yes.
Yes. If you receive gold as a gift, is that to be included as part of the contribution to the 85 grams of gold?
Yes. It's
Excellent.
yours.
Excellent. Another question here from, I won't say the name. If you are saving money with a specific purpose in mind, for example, to go on Hajj or to buy your first home, is this money considered part of your assets for zakat?
Yes, it is.
Would you like to elaborate on that?
You have liquid cash, which you're able to access at any time. And I would say that if you're holding a large lump sum like that, then you should do your best to put it into something that's not only going to save the value, but actually give you some growth. And so, because you have the ability to invest it, spend it, or grow it, you are liable for zakat.
Excellent. Another question is, when we set aside usual expenses, does that also include emergency funds that we save for, if you like, a rainy day, or right now we're in the middle of a virus? So when we set aside usual expenses, does that include emergency funds?
Yes, it includes emergency funds, all available liquid cash.
Okay. This is a good one. If you are a teen that doesn't support a household, but have a small amount of money in the bank from various sources, do you have to pay zakat on it?
This is an excellent question. And so if you are a teen and you are above the age of puberty, or near the age of puberty, without difference between the scholars, you are obligated to pay zakat on that money because it is yours. If it is more than the nisab, if it is less than the nisab, then you do not need to. Now, our scholars from the Hanafi school made an exception for small children, right? Those who are under the age of puberty. And the majority of scholars said even those who are under the age of puberty, zakat is the right of wealth, not the right of the individual. And so as long as there's wealth, their guardian can pay the zakat or calculate the zakat for them. But if you're a teen, you're probably, in or around the age of puberty, then yes, according to all schools, you would have to pay zakat.
Okay, so you're a teen, you're hustling, you've got some money in the bank, it's more than the nisab, you should go out and pay that zakat.
If it's more than nisab. And you know what? I think it's important for you to do it. And the reason being is that the earlier you can make it normal for yourself to be charitable, the easier you and the better you will do in life. There's very interesting studies about C-suite executives that has shown that people that are CEO, CFO, CTO, that those who give charity and mentor people actually earn more in life, because the more they give, the more they get. And so starting that as as a tradition for yourself early on, a ritual for yourself, is really important.
Sheikh, I will just share with those who are listening this evening that Penny Appeal is running currently a Feed Our World program. We run it every year. We are about 7 or 6 days away from the beginning of Ramadan. The Feed Our World program is an opportunity for us to serve both food parcels and hot meals to some of the poorest communities around the world, communities that suffer from chronic food shortages. And so everybody has an opportunity this evening, today, to donate, to make a gift. One food box is $45. That's enough for 30 individual meals. You will see a donate tab there next to ask a question. So those of you interested in supporting a family with a food package, it costs $1.50 per meal. So that's $45 for 30 meals. You can do it on this platform. You can go to pausa.org and do it on the website. With Ramadan around the corner, we are trying to reach, inshallah, as many families as possible. Another question we get, Sheikh, a lot of is around dual income households, husband and wife, they're both making money. Talk to us a little bit about that. So in that situation, they may have a joint account, they may have just one of the partners. For example, the husband may have lots of student loan, or the wife may have a lot of student loan. How do you approach joint accounts? How do you approach joint income households?
So the Prophet ﷺ actually spoke about conjoined wealth, or joint accounts and joint wealth that's held by two different people. Men and women, regardless of whether married to each other or not, have their own separate financial liabilities. And if they conjoin those liabilities or those savings, they're still liable for zakat. The Prophet ﷺ said, "لا يجمع بين متفرق ولا يفرق بين مجتمع خشية الصدقة." People should neither separate their wealth nor join it together out of fear of paying their zakat. And so if you have a joint account, what I would say is calculate your joint expenses and your joint earnings and pay from that joint account. If you as a wife have your own separate account, then you can simply take the value from that, and your husband take the value from his, and you can all pay it at one time, or you can pay it separately, right? But you should never try to mix and match to get away from it. But you can put all of the values together to be able to pay it. And if you end up paying extra, then anything that you pay in extra is going to be considered optional charity for you, and will only be in the scales of your good deeds on the day of judgment. But I know that with dual income households, it's a question that comes up a lot. So definitely you can treat each account separately, or you can put everything together in an Excel sheet and calculate that.
Excellent. So for those of us who maybe have loaned money out, right? So you may have a friend in need, a family member in need, or a business partner, you've loaned out money. What do you do with the money that you've loaned out? For example, I've given my friend $5,000. Do I calculate that? Do I not calculate that in my assets?
Excellent question. So there are two types of debt. There's good debt and there's bad debt. Bad debt is debt that you cannot collect on because it's not due, or you cannot collect on because the person will not pay it. Even if you have every proof in the world that they owe it to you, they say, "I don't know who you are, Osama, I'm not paying you anything," that you will not include. When does something become good debt? It becomes good debt when it is, number one, due, and number two, you can collect on it. So if I borrowed $5,000 from you, Osama, and I said, "Hey, I want to transfer this $5,000 to you. I'm going to enact a transfer on the bank account tonight." You say, No, Joe, hold on to it. Next month, I'll be in Houston for an event. Just give it to me there, right? Then I'm holding on to it as a trust, as an amana for you, and therefore it's actually yours, and so you should include it in your assets in that case.
Great. I should have said many minutes ago, welcome to our Facebook viewers too. We are streaming live on Facebook. And so I'm looking at the those of us who've joined us here on Crowdcast and their questions. And so if you are on Facebook, we do advise please to come onto the Crowdcast link, which is being shared in the feed there, in the comments feed. You can join us on Crowdcast and ask your question directly. Alternatively, you can ask your question in the comments section of the Facebook live feed, and one of the PA USA team members will get that across to me. So welcome, and I hope you've enjoyed this if you've been watching on Facebook. We'll carry on, Sheikh, with a few questions. The issue regarding the nisab, one more time. The nisab is the same whether you live in the US or the UK or New Zealand or Australia, or is it different?
No, it is the same. So what you will do is you will take the price of gold and silver. So the idea is the weight of that gold or silver, because that becomes an objective standard set during the life of the Prophet ﷺ. So that 20 gold dinars or 85 grams of gold, the 200 silver dirhams or the 595 grams of silver. Now the price of gold in the United States might be 50 cents, and the price price of silver in the United States might be 50 cents. And in the UK might be something else, and Uzbekistan might be something else, and in India might be another. So you'll take the local market price of those metals in your country, but the amount that you calculate per gram will be the same.
Great. Earlier on, when we were discussing the categories of zakat, who deserves or who is deserving of receiving zakat money, one question we get a lot is, if you like, an ambiguous one, which is in Allah's path, right? What is in Allah's path?
So according to classical scholars, the majority of classical scholars said that in Allah's path were those unconscripted soldiers who were volunteering to protect the lands of Muslims on the borders. They were not people that were working as military individuals, but they were in the defense of the ummah at that time. Other scholars said that the meaning is actually broader. Some of them, like the Hanabila, actually said that in Allah's path includes travel for the sake of Allah, such as someone going to Hajj or Umrah, because of the hadith in Sahih Ibn Hibban that the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-Hajj wal-Umratu fi sabilillah. Hajj and Umrah is in Allah's path. So if you had a person who would not be able to make Hajj or Umrah if they were not given, then it would be permissible for you to give them zakah in order for them to be able to make Hajj and Umrah and fulfill that obligation. Other scholars have said that the idea of fi sabilillah, the idea of jihad is what? It is for Allah's words to be highest. And therefore, anything that seeks to make Allah's word the highest, such as calling people to Islam, such as protecting the name of Islam, even if it does not involve some type of conflict, right? Then it is considered to be fi sabilillah, and it is permissible to give to those causes as well. I would caution, however, that many people have taken this as a very elastic category. And so we have mosques and Islamic centers that say, we're in communities, we are working fi sabilillah, we're working in Allah's path, give to us. And then everything goes to the building fund, and the poor and the indigent and those who are doing without receive nothing in those areas. And so I think that it's extremely important when we choose who to give to, that the organizations that we give to are transparent with their programming, transparent with their expenses, and we know that they are using the zakat funds for their intended purposes.
Excellent. We just got a very interesting question, which surprisingly is very normal question. And what the question does, and I think we've all at some point or another confused the two, it conflates zakat al-fitr with zakat al-mal. And so the questioner asks, why do some mosques or masajid promote zakat for $12, and how is that different to 12.5%? So some clarification, and when we're talking about zakat this evening, we're talking about zakat al-mal, when we talk about $10 or $12, we're talking about Zakat al-Fitr. If you could touch on that a little bit, that would be great.
Sure. So Zakat al-Fitr is another form of charity. It's another form of duty that we have, and it is given with the express purpose of expiating any of the mistakes or the sins that we committed while we were fasting the fast of Ramadan. And it is obligatory upon every household to give as one saw, which is a medieval form of measure, which is about, about 2.5 kilos, I believe, of grains, of dates, basically staple goods. And it is given for the express purpose of allowing those people who are experiencing hunger and going without on the day of Eid to, number one, for them to have food on that day to eat, and then number two, for them to be able to share in the joy of a joyous occasion such as Eid. And so what mosques and Islamic centers and organizations around the world are doing when they say $7, $10, $12, I wonder what the inflation rate on Zakat al-Fitr is sometimes. But what they're doing is they're saying, give us that money. We will then take it and then buy food parcels or staple goods and give them to the poor. There are some people who will give it as cash to the poor as well, and that is an acceptable opinion according to some scholars. You have to decide what you do, but it's not simply enough to just say, I gave it to the mosque and they're going to take care of it. You are responsible for understanding not only what you're paying and how you're paying it, but how it's being utilized. So if your local mosque says, give us $10, $12 for Zakat al-Fitr, ask them, have you organized with local food banks and contacted organizations that work directly with the poor to make sure that this is going to get to them by Eid and be able to allow them to enjoy the day of Eid? Otherwise, it might simply just be going to the building fund again.
Absolutely, which is why we encourage everyone viewing tonight to actually pay your zakat early, your zakat al-fitr early.
Yes.
I mean, how many of us get to the Eid prayers and we remember as we're about to start our Eid prayers too late, because then how are we as an institution or an organization going to distribute those funds to families in time for Eid al-Fitr? So we're talking here this evening, for those who are viewing and perhaps new to zakat and new to what we're discussing this evening, there are two types of zakat that are compulsory. One is zakat al-mal, which is on your money, on the assets, and there is zakat al-fitr, which is a smaller, if you like, mandatory zakat given for Ramadan specifically, depending on how many individuals in your household.
Yes, and I'm actually very glad that you mentioned paying early. So there is precedent for paying early. Number one, the Prophet ﷺ said that whoever pays their zakat al-fitr after the salah of Eid, then it's only a general charity that they have given. It does nothing to expiate anything from Ramadan. It should be paid before the salah, and it should favorably reach the poor before that time. He allowed the companions of the Prophet, and it's narrated from Ibn Umar, that he would sometimes pay his zakat al-fitr 2 to 3 days in advance of Eid to make sure that it would reach the poor. Scholars in generations after that had said Ibn Umar had only done that because of the expanding nature of the community, and that now we would allow up to a week or more in order for us to pay our zakat al-fitr in advance. What I want to appeal to everyone listening today is that if you pay it a week to 2 weeks in advance, there's no blame on you for doing that. And that's simply because logistically, there will be many challenges this year due to supply chains, transportation, because of COVID-19. So make it a point to pay it and pay it early so that obligation is taken care of.
I'm very conscious of the time. We have just gone over an hour, but there are a couple of important questions that I want to do justice to. So if you don't mind, Sheikh, we take a few more minutes of your time. One of them is, again, around zakat al-fitr, not zakat al-mal.
Yes.
And so the question is coming in from Facebook. So again, welcome to those of you on Facebook. Is zakat al-fitr mandated upon all individuals or only the head of the household? If all family members generate income, should we all be paying separately?
So zakat al-fitr is an obligation on the head of household, right? And they are the ones that would pay it for the members of their family. If you are, and they should pay it per head, right? So it is for each person, young and old, and male or female. But the head of the household is the one who would be responsible for that.
Okay.
Now, if you are earning and you are contributing to the household, then it only makes sense for you to pay it for yourself as well, or contribute to the head of house. So if you're young and living at home, then I think it's only fair that you help your parent out or the head of household at home to contribute to that. But it has to be paid per head.
Excellent. Final question. Giving in Ramadan. We find a lot of our donors, when they communicate with us, specifically sometimes tell us, we have X amount of money, but we're going to hold on to it for a few months because we like to give in Ramadan. Is there something in our theology, in our tradition, that encourages zakat al-mal to be paid in Ramadan? And is there more rewards for individuals who like to pay their zakat al-mal in Ramadan?
So I think what's happening is there is an overextension of understanding the Prophet ﷺ's generosity in Ramadan. So Aisha and Bukhari, she reports that the Prophet ﷺ كان أجود من الريح وكان أجود ما يكون في رمضان. The Prophet ﷺ was more generous than a blowing wind, and the most generous he was during Ramadan. This didn't mean that he wasn't giving other times of the year, or that he was delaying his zakah until the Ramadan. In fact, your zakat is due whenever you reach nisab, and then that year ends, whether that year ends in Ramadan or outside of Ramadan. Now, some people like to delay it towards Ramadan. As I mentioned, many of the pious scholars and leaders of the past would actually pay it in Sha'ban, because they wanted to make sure that that obligation was done, and everything they gave in Ramadan was extra and filled in the gaps for anything that they had that was an obligation. So there's nothing in our theology that says that it has to or must be paid in Ramadan. Whenever there is a need and whenever it becomes an obligation, that's when you should pay.
Excellent. Like you said at the beginning, I think we could be here for 3 or 4 hours. I think zakat is one of those fascinating things. There's so many different possible combinations of giving, and everyone has very unique personal circumstances and personal finances. But we will unfortunately have to wrap up for this evening. For those, Sheikh, who want to read some of your articles, you've written some great, fantastic articles on zakat and Islamic finance generally, and personal finances. If you could share your website with us one more time so that people can check out your website and benefit.
So my website is joebradford.net. And on the topic of zakat, I've written a book. It's called Simple Zakat Guide, which you can get on the Kindle as well as in print form from Amazon.com.
Excellent. I will wrap up by saying that a reminder that we are now 6 or 7 days away from the beginning of Ramadan here in the United States. What's essential, of course, in Ramadan is the ability to have enough nutrition and food to break your fast with at the end of the day. So for those, imagine fasting 18 hours a day, 16, 15 hours a day. Imagine getting to the end of the day without sufficient nourishment, without sufficient access to food. And so what we do every year at Penny Pool USA is we distribute food parcels, and we organize distributions of hot meals in over 30 countries. We do it here in the United States, and we do it in Africa, the Middle East, and Asia, serving families most in need. If you'd like to sponsor one of those families, if you'd like to sponsor a meal, go to our website, pausa.org, and there you can find out all about our Feed Our World program. For $45, you can sponsor a family and provide them with 30 meals this coming Ramadan. You can do that on our website, pausa.org. For those of you watching us on Crowdcast, there is a pop-up and a donate feature that you can also use. For those of you who perhaps logged in late, we are recording this. The whole webinar has been recorded, so please do rewind. You can watch it, and it will shortly go up on our social media platforms. So all that's left to do, Sheikh, is to thank you for your time.
No, thank you so much for having me. I was the one that benefited by you having me on. So Jazakallah khair.
Barakallahu fiqh. Thank you again for your time. I pray, inshallah, I hope everybody has a fantastic Ramadan full of blessings. May Allah accept your fasts, your prayers. May you all have healthy, inshallah, Ramadans, and that COVID, inshallah, does not impact your families too badly. And our prayers and thoughts are with those who've suffered both from a health perspective and financially from the COVID outbreak. Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.